Hello and welcome. So my name is Lisa Graham from YYC Beeswax, and I'm here today to share with you how to make 3 different styles of taper candles. So today is like a 3-in-1 tutorial. We're going to be doing a flat top taper, what I call a pencil taper, so the top looks like a pencil. And then we're going to do a full taper, which is a really cool spiral. And there are lots of options you can do with these candles, and I'm going to go through those as we start today. So if you have your materials, feel free to grab them and follow along. And I'm going to switch over to the second camera and we'll start walking through the supplies you need to make these candles. And then we'll go through each of the different types of tapers today. So welcome, thank you for being here, and let's get started. So over here, I have all of the materials ready, and each of the sheets are going to make 2 taper candles. So since we're doing 3 different styles, I have 3 different colors of sheets here. And I've got the cutting board underneath, super important. The ruler here, I'm using a 24-inch metal ruler. It works very well. We're going to be doing some corner-to-corner cuts today, so having that extra length in the ruler will be very helpful. You can get by using a shorter ruler, or if you have a long board or something, you can use that for cutting as well. Then we have our wick down here and our scissors for cutting the wick, a heat gun. We're going to take the bloom off of the sheets. We'll go over that shortly. If you don't have a heat gun, a hair dryer will work just as well. And finally, I have an X-Acto knife here. You're welcome to use the sharp edge of a ruler. This ruler is quite sharp, so it will work for cutting. You can use a pizza cutter. If you're using a knife of any sort, I highly recommend getting something to protect your fingers. I'm going to be using a regular tin can. That's going to keep my fingers out of the way in case the knife slips. I had an accident a couple years ago and it was not fun. So make sure you respect the knives and keep knife safety in mind. So without further ado, let's clear off our workspace and get started. So I'm going to start with this sheet here. These ones I have already taken the bloom off of, so we're going to start by taking the bloom off of this sheet. We'll pull those out of the way, and we are left with this sheet. So bloom is a natural thing that happens to beeswax over time. It creates a little bit of a matte film over here. So this sheet is going to turn a very dark color when we're done. This is actually a midnight black sheet. So it looks a little bit gray in the picture right now, and when I take that bloom off, we're going to see that dark black come out. So I'm going to give that a shot. And you can see pretty much right away we've got that bloom off. It's a little bit shinier over here. You want to be really careful when working with the heat gun, especially, and also with your hair dryer. You don't want to melt through the wax. So if you notice, I'm moving the heat gun back and forth a little bit so we're not creating hot spots. So we're going to finish this side up. And there's a little bit of bloom left on this side. It's mostly gone. But what I like to do is to do the other side. There's a little bit of bloom left on this side, so when I heat it up, we're going to get rid of that last little bit of bloom. Perfect. So now our sheet is ready to use. So the first type of taper I'm going to talk about today is a flat top taper. Now you can get 2 taper candles from each of the sheets we're working on, unless you're going to be doing a super tall candle. I've made super tall candles, so they're about 16 inches. They're the height of these sheets. They look really stunning if you have a high ceiling of any sort. But today we're going to do, they're about 8-inch tall candles. So we're basically going to cut this sheet in half and then we're going to roll each of the pieces. So I'm going to set my ruler up here. And we're going to find that edge, and my ruler is hitting the wall, so I have to make some adjustments here. Okay, so next up I'm going to grab the knife. You can also use your fingernail to do the markings or anything. We just want to make a little impression in the wax. So we're going to mark that halfway point, which is 8 inches, and then we're going to pop up to the top. And we're going to measure that halfway point on the other side as well. So we're just creating a little bit of a marking there. Next, I like to gently pull up where those markings are. That's going to give you a really good indication of where our cutting line is going to be. And then we measure, we put the ruler up against those markings. We're going to use our protective can. And we're going to cut very carefully along the ruler. So now we have our 2 pieces. And if you want to make sure your candles are exactly the same height, I will tap them down. And if you look really closely here, at this end they are pretty close to the same height. This end there's a little bit of difference. Personally, I don't think that's going to make a huge difference. I'll flip it around. It might make a little bit of a difference. So what we can do is we can trim that little bit off if we want. So we can cut that little piece off. I basically just marked it with the knife. There we go. So now our tapers should match in height. Next up, we're going to grab the wick, and we're going to measure along the edge. We want to make sure that wick goes all the way to the bottom. So you can see I have it all the way to the bottom. And then we're going to decide how much wick we want to come out the top. Now you can get fancy with your wick here. You can do a looped wick if you would like. I cover some details on how to do that in the beehive tutorial, so if you're interested in doing that, feel free to check that video out. I'm going to keep these ones nice and simple, so I'm going to decide how much wick I want out the top, and we'll cut the wick. Since we have 2 pieces here, I'm going to cut both of those wicks right away. Okay. Now I'm going to grab one of my sheets of wax, and we'll put the other one aside for now, along with its wick, and we're going to line up the wick across just like when we were measuring it. And because these are a little bit of a taller candle, I usually let the wick flop wherever it will, and I start at the bottom and I gently bring that wax up. So I'll bring it a little bit closer to the camera so you can see what I'm doing. So I'm gently bringing that wax up and around the wick. And I'm going to do that all the way along. And the wick is kind of going to stick to the wax, which will make this, make it stay in place a little bit easier. I'm going to do that all the way along till we get up to the top. And then we're going to continue rolling. So as you're rolling, you want to keep it nice and tight and keep that bottom flat. And this is the trickiest part of the candle. I say that in all of my videos. Getting started is the trickiest part. So you just be a little bit patient with yourself as you go through this part. So the heating up the wax makes it a lot easier to work with, and I find the darker dyes, especially the black because it's so dark, they're a lot more malleable, so they are are super easy to work with, especially after they've been heated up. Okay, so now we're really going. So we're making sure that bottom stays flat, keeping it nice and tight all the way along. We're going to keep rolling all the way to the end. And what I like to do when I get to the end, if it's not quite flat on the bottom, I will gently press it down. And then we get to the end and we want to make sure our candle doesn't come unrolled. So you want to gently press all the way along. And this is working beautifully because this wax is so malleable. So I'm getting a nice seal in there. Then we have our taper candle. So that's one type of candle. So you can see at the top it's nice and flat there. So we have a flat top and a flat bottom. So that is the flat candle. Next up, I'm going to show you how to make what I call the pencil taper. So these ones have that little bit of a point at the top. And the color I'm going to be using today, this one is called Christmas Red. It's a super popular color during the holiday season. And basically what we're going to do to create this pencil taper is we're going to cut it at an angle. Now you can decide how much of an angle you want by adjusting your numbers. So basically, as we cut it across, this edge and this edge are going to be the same height, and this edge and this edge are going to be the same height. So as we adjust this angle, we're adjusting how much of a taper you get at the top. So my favorite way to make these, I like to measure, because the sheets are about 16 inches, the halfway point is 8, and I like to measure 8.5 inches. So when we're doing our measuring, we're going to measure from one end up our 8.5 inches, and then we're going to measure from the opposite corner and measure up our 8.5 inches. So let's see how that's going to look. So I am actually going to pull out a smaller ruler for this. So here we go. So we have our 8.5 inch marking right here. So we'll give that a mark. And I measured from this corner. So in the next one, I'm going to measure from the opposite corner. So we're going to measure our 8 inches here, and 8.5 is here. Okay, so if I pull my markings up, where is that marking? Right here. You can see it's a very slight angle, but it's going to make a difference when we're rolling. So there we go. Cut that piece. And if I put them together, we're also checking for differences in height. These ones look really good. If I flip it over, you're going to see the height difference. So if you can see there's a little bit lighter color where the wax is not doubled up. It's a little bit tricky to see. You can see kind of over here, you can see that difference. So that's about how much of a taper we're going to get on the top. That's where our pencil part comes in. Okay, so the next step again is wick. So we want to use the wick. We're going to measure it against the tallest side. So this one, that side quite a bit shorter than the other, so we want to make sure we measure on that tall side. Again, I'm going to keep it nice and simple. Cut that wick. Cut the wick. 2 wicks for 2 candles. And we're going to put one of these to the side with its wick. And then we're going to grab our wick and we'll use the same process to roll this candle. So this is, same things apply. We're going to gently fold, get that rolling started by folding that wick over the edge, or folding the wax over the edge of the wick all the way down, keeping it nice and tight as we're rolling, and keeping that bottom flat. And it's not going to be very long until we see that top start to give us that spiral at the top. Okay, and you can see as I'm rolling it's not always even, and that is okay. The beeswax is very forgiving. It will allow us to adjust it a little bit when we're done. So if you see at the top, we're starting to get a little bit of that spiral happening. These are probably my favorite taper candles. That little bit of a spiral at the top gives it a little bit of character, I think. So we're going to roll it up to the end. You can really see that taper, that spiraling happening on the top. I'm going to press it into the bottom, and then we're going to seal those edges, making sure it's not going to come apart. And this Christmas red, I've already taken the bloom off before we started, so this one is nice and malleable too. So you can see right at the top, we have that little bit of a spiral happening, and we'll compare that to our last candle. So you can see how flat it is compared to our spiral there. So that's how you make your pencil taper candles. So I'm going to put that one to the side, and we're going to move on to our final candle. And this color I'm using here, this one is called Pink Innocence. It's a nice pastel color. I find a lot of times the young girls love this color. Sometimes the young boys love it too. It's a very nice spring color. It's nice and pastel-y. This is the color I use when I'm making Advent candle sets. So if you're making your own Advent candles, yeah, anything you need this light pink for, it's beautiful, beautiful color. Now the light sheets are a little bit more challenging to work with, so if you're working with a white, any of these light dyes, the Cayman Blue that I used in the mini taper session, they can be a little bit more crumbly to work with. So we'll see how this one works today. It's feeling like it's pretty good today. And that these lighter colors, it's really important to heat those ones up before. So in order to make this, basically we're taking the concept of this little spiral at the top, and we're going to move that through the whole candle. So the first two candles we made today will fit a standard taper holder. This one is a little bit bigger, so you'll have to manipulate it if you want to put it in a taper holder. So basically to create these, we're going to create a big spiral all the way down the candle, and to get that we're going to cut it from corner to corner. So this one, there's no measuring required, we're just going to do a straight cut corner to corner. Okay. Hopefully that cut all the way through. It didn't feel like it did. And it didn't. So basically I'm just going to fold these in half and we're going to break it apart. There we go. Okay, so now we have two giant triangles we're going to use. And there are two different ways you can make this candle. I am going to make them this direction, so they're still going to be the about 8.5 inches tall. The other way you can make these is by switching it around, and it's going completely out of the frame of the camera. So you can put your wick this way, and these ones actually will fit in a standard taper holder, and they're super tall. They're about 16 inches tall, and you can roll it this way. There's some really cool stuff you can do with when you use the tall candle. I like to flare them out And that's basically taking the edges and gently manipulating them out so you get a little bit of a flare. They're quite pretty. And these ones, again, if you're going to do it the tall way, they're great for vaulted ceilings, rooms with vaulted ceilings, or when you need a little bit taller of a candle. But today we're going to make, they're about 8.5 inches tall. We're going to roll them this way. So our next step is to grab some wick. Same thing as with our other candles. We'll cut that wick, make sure we have 2. And I'm going to move the other piece to the side with its wick, and we'll try not to move this cutting board too much. The same process will apply with this one. So same thing we've done with the other candles. So gently lifting that wick up, rolling it over, or the wax up and rolling it over the wick. All the way along. And we want to roll it nice and tight, keeping that bottom flat. And these ones, the trick comes in because we have a spiral all the way to the bottom. They don't have a solid base for you to roll on, so it's very easy to start rolling in different directions so the bottom isn't flat anymore. So this one is sticking to the cutting board today. So just keep moving along. And you can see at the top we're starting to get that taper. So it's a little, this is with the lighter color, it's a little harder to see. We'll roll it a little bit more, and then we should really be able to see that spiral happening. There we go. So you can see that spiral happening right at the top. So now it's getting a little easier to roll. So what I like to do is to continue putting pressure, not all the way to the end, but to the end of the wax. If you notice, my hand is moving in as we get closer to the end of the candle. So I'm trying to keep that pressure where the wax is. And as we get closer to the end, a trick I like to use when we're almost to the end is to turn the candle up, press it down as we have with our other candles, and then fold the wax around, because it's really hard to roll when you get to that very end of the wax. And this is a similar strategy I use when I'm creating the beehive candles as well. So if you check out the beehive candle tutorial, I do the same thing with that. So once you've reached the end, you want to press. I usually go about 1 time around. That's the same thing I do with the beeswax or the beehive candle as well. So I'm gently pressing it in to make sure it stays about 1 time around the candle. And then we press that bottom flat, and we've got that really pretty full spiral all the way down to the bottom. Now if you're doing the super tall candles, you can do it with these as well. You can gently pull these edges out, so those, you gently flare them out, and that creates a really pretty candle too. So let's look at all the candles, all the different types of tapers we've made today. So we've got the flat taper, the pencil taper, and the full taper. And I'll show you how they fit in a taper holder. So this one, easy fit. This one, super easy fit. And this one is a little bit big. So if we see the size of the bottom of the candle versus the size of the taper candle. So what you can do is you can pull these in, you can pinch them in until it fits, or you can just set it on top. That's what I usually do when I burn them. I just set it on the top of the holder. So there you have it, 3 different styles of taper candles. Thank you very much for joining me today. I hope you had fun making taper candles. If you want more information or you need some assistance, feel free to join our Facebook group. It's called Beginner Beeswax Candle Making. We have a great community over there. And if you're looking for more beeswax sheet ideas, you can check out our other tutorials. We do some mini tapers, a beehive candle, a mini pillar. And you can also check us out on Pinterest. We're YYC Beeswax on Pinterest, and we have a board with tons and tons of great beeswax sheet ideas. And if you would like to get in contact with us, you can find us on Facebook at YYC Beeswax, Instagram and Twitter at YYC Wax, or you can check out our YouTube channel. We have some great educational resources there, and we're under YYC Beeswax on YouTube. So thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you had fun, and I look forward to seeing you again another time. So thank you so much, and I'll see you again.